Hey, the memo is out. What do you think? I kind of think it's a nothing burger. We'll talk about it when Freedom returns at 5.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. The Nunes memo, of course, released on Friday, and everybody to their stations. Adam Schiff, you ready for this?
Yeah.
Here's Adam Schiff suggesting that the release of this memo will result in our inability to present the next to prevent the next Oklahoma City bombing. I'm not kidding.
They have damaged the relationship between our committee and the intelligence community. In the future, the intelligence community is going to be very wary about sharing information with us because they won't trust us to be responsible stewards of it. And sources of information are going to dry up. If you have a neighbor next door who's buying a lot of fertilizer and it seems odd to you because they don't have a yard, are you going to think twice before calling the FBI? Because if they get a search warrant for your neighbor and something is politicized, the political winds change, and there's an investigation, your identity is going to be revealed.
I mean,
Seriously, the hyperbole, the hysteria.
the shamelessness. Trey Gowdy responded to Schiff's hysteria and as representative of the Democrats on Face the Nation.
Well, the FBI was gravely concerned that there was information missing from this memo, that it actually was dangerous in setting a precedent in terms of disclosing classified information, and it could actually hurt future intelligence efforts. How do you respond to that? And to Chris Wray?
Difficult facts make for really bad precedent. I hope this is a one-off. I hope it is a one-off that Congress takes this position, but I also hope it's a one-off that a FISA application contains errors and product that is funded by a political opponent. I hope that's a one-off. So
That's the Steele dossier that you are pointing to there.
But it's both the Steele dossier and who paid for it and whether or not it was vetted, but it's also what was not in it. This is an application to a court. So I get that Adam Schiff and others are worried about what's not in my memo.
Mm-hmm.
I wish that they were equally concerned about what's not in the FISA application, which is a lot of really important information about the source and his subsources, and the fact that he was hired by the DNC and the Clinton campaign, and the fact that he was biased against President Trump. That is all information that the finder of fact is entitled to.
Well, there you go. And for sort of an independent arbiter of the two sides, Alan Dershowitz over the weekend talking about this important point that Gowdy was making. Remember that the FISA warrant application process is an ex parte proceeding, meaning it's the FBI presenting evidence. And so they are duty bound to present all of the material facts, even those adverse to their request. And Dershowitz makes that point.
We have to worry generally about the FBI when they're getting FISA requests and warrants, that they don't make full disclosure, that because they have the right to get ex parte warrants without the other side being involved, they have a special obligation to make sure that they disclose everything, even the negative aspects of it. And we know one thing for sure, they did not disclose that this dossier came from a biased source. They should have disclosed that. This is a systemic problem, not just a problem in this particular case. What I worry is that this may reflect a general approach that the FBI takes when they get FISA warrants, disclosing only what they want to disclose and not telling the court about information that might lead them to reach a different conclusion.
So, I mean, the FBI used information paid for by the Democrats to spy on a Trump advisor. They could have put that information in there.
Yes, and again, according to the memo, the Gowdy-Nunes memo, outgoing FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe told the committee that there would have been no FISA application to surveil former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, absent the information, that unverified, politicized information in the Steele dossier. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Matthew Continetti. He is the editor of the Washington Free Beacon and a contributing editor to the Weekly Standard. Matthew, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here.
So, this is a bit of a PR game. Did the memo live up to the hype or did it not live up to the hype? But beyond that, Dershowitz and Gowdy, do they not raise legitimate points about whether this case is unique or not? It presents a unique a uniquely troubling set of facts that should be publicly known.
Oh, and I think they raise interesting points. I will say the one question I get from people who don't pay a lot of attention to politics but are interested in the news is, what is going on? There's a lot of confusion about this
Well, there's
memo,
many layers to the story.
Exactly, and it's a very technical and legal, and you kind of got into it, I think, in the intro, all the various aspects of it. And I think it leaves a lot of voters kind of confused and just kind of ignorant. And I have to say that probably is to President Trump's advantage here, because what President Trump has been wanting to do since really this dossier was disclosed publicly in January of 2017 is to say that it's unverified, it's salacious, and the Russia investigation was either kind of a put-up job or misleading. Introducing the facts contained in the memo, I think, helped bolster his case, and so kind of shifts the ground of the debate over the Russia investigation onto terrain that the president and his allies are more comfortable in.
But it just bothers me. I mean, the Democrats paid for this dossier, which was presented to the court as if it was true. Correct?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And so what's interesting is, if you listen to Jerry Nadler kind of leaked his response or rebuttal to the Nunes memo to NBC News, and if you read Jerry Nadler, who's the Democrat congressman from New York City, he says, well, look, Steele is a trusted FBI source, and so that's what the FBI was saying to the FISA court was, we trust Christopher Steele. But remember, and this is Andy McCarthy at National Review points out, the dossier is not Christopher Steele's information.
Right.
It's what he is passing on from his sources, and it's not verified. And that's the funny thing to me about this story is we're having this argument over the memo and which memo is right and which memo should we release and release both memos. Well, what are the underlying facts of the case? We've had this dossier out in the public record now for over a year, and I don't believe any of it has been verified.
Well,
I mean, there may be parts of certain travels that Carter Page was engaged in, but then he disputes the details, and so it's unclear to me what the actual basis for any of this debate is.
Well, to Andy McCarthy's statement on this point that you're making, which is a really important one, the actual sources of the information are Steele's informants, anonymous Russians providing accounts based on hearsay 3 and 4 times removed from people said to have observed the events alleged. And so you also have this fascinating irony, right? Don't trust, the Russians that Carter Page talks to and anybody that's associated with Trump, but trust the Russians that Christopher Steele talked to.
Right, and I think in some cases they may be the same Russians.
Yeah, well, okay,
which is even funnier. I mean, we just don't know because they're anonymously sourced in this dossier. What I think is interesting is if you look at, of course, the real elephant in the room here is Robert Mueller and his investigation. But if you kind of read the reports on the Mueller investigation in recent days, what you get is a sense is that he is not really interested in these allegations of collusion or conspiracy with the Russians to affect the election, which would be the criminal offense. It seems now that he's kind of moved on and has become much more interested in, did the president and his associates obstruct justice by, say, firing James Comey or issuing a misleading statement about that meeting in Trump Tower in June 2016. So I wonder actually how much attention Robert Mueller has paid to the dossier throughout his special counsel investigation. And of course, that's something we just won't know until he issues his final report.
Yeah, but whatever Mueller releases in the end, do you think people will believe?
Well, I think, we're now kind of so siloed, right? And I think that we have to look at what he's released up to now. And this, I think, is revealing. Up to now, the criminal charges that he has filed, right, have nothing to do with any conspiracy with the Russians to affect the election.
It's mostly for
They're
lying
process
to the FBI.
crimes.
Yeah.
Right. In the case of George Papadopoulos, who's apparently his drunken rant started this whole misadventure, it was lying to the FBI that he was charged with, not with conspiracy. In the case of Manafort and Gates, they were charged with lobbying crimes that happened in some cases 10 years before the election. And in the case of Michael Flynn's guilty plea, again, it was for lying to the FBI about these conversations that he had with the Russian ambassador after the election. So until Mueller, I think, charges someone with an actual crime related to the underlying, reason for all of this, which was these accusations of Russian conspiracy with people in Trump's orbit to affect the election, I think we have to say that a lot of this has been kind of a typical Washington special prosecutor in search of a crime.
How did you receive Jim Comey's tweet upon the release? Dishonest and misleading memo wrecked the House Intel Committee, destroyed trust with the intelligence community, damaged relationship with FISA court, and inexcusably exposed classified information of an American citizen. For what?
Well, I think Jim Comey has really revealed himself in a lot of his tweeting since kind of reemerging in the public sphere. And he's definitely a man with an axe to grind. And, that was clear, too, when his memos showed up shortly after he was fired in the New York Times. And those memos, of course, are what triggered the special counsel investigation. So Jim Comey has an axe to grind. But, he also has something to worry about. And what's being lost in a lot of the debate over the memo is, I think, a more important document, which hasn't been released yet. And that is the Department of Justice Inspector General report on the Bureau and DOJ's handling of the Clinton email investigation. And again, you have to read these stories very closely to kind of try to get at what's actually happening. What I understand, just from the public sourcing, this is going to be a very damaging report to James Comey and to Andrew McCabe and to all of these Justice Department officials, many of whom have already been reassigned. Of course, we know about the FBI agents Strzok and Page who were texting and having the affair. When that report comes out, I think it's going to be a bombshell, and I also think that it's going to be much harder for the media, the mainstream media, the media outlets that have kind of been against transparency when it comes to the Nunes memo, which is amazing to me. It's going to be harder for those outlets to dismiss this IG report.
Speaking of Page, and I agree with you about that IG report, that should be very interesting. But speaking of Page, the application needs to be approved by an FBI lawyer before it goes to the FISA court. We're focused on Rudolph Contreras, the Obama appointee FISA court judge. Is it possible Lisa Page did the review of the application before it went to the FISA court?
And we just really don't know. There's even more that we have yet to find out. And of course, Chairman Nunes says that there will probably be more statements and memos and eventually a report from his committee about all the various aspects of this. I have to say something too about Carter Page, the other Page, the guy who's at the center of all this. Yeah. Well, now he'd been on the intelligence radar for some time because of his contacts with Russians, but then it's also been reported by the Wall Street Journal that in 2015 he was helping the FBI conduct a counterintelligence investigation against a Russian spy who was attached to their consulate in New York. So here you have a guy who, it was on the FBI radar before his contacts, but then he was helping the FBI, and then a year later, the FBI is applying for a FISA award again. So he's a shady character, and I think if I were in the intelligence community, I would be, kind of wondering what he's up to as well. But when you introduce the allegations in the dossier, the unverified allegations in the dossier as part of the reason for his warrant, then I think you have a problem.
And you wonder why the American people are confused and hate politics. Matthew Continetti, editor of the Washington Free Beacon, contributing editor to the Weekly Standard. Matt, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear